Hello artists! Welcome back! Today we are going to create a piece of pie for Pie Day using cardboard, some kind of tape. So if you have masking tape, that's best. I have painter's tape. You could use probably some Scotch tape, but if you have masking tape, that's the best. We're going to go ahead and start by cutting out a long rectangle of our cardboard. The best kind of cardboard would be like from a cereal box or something that's a little bit thinner. We're going to go, so that's just about a finger's length for me. You could go a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. Try to open up your scissors wide and cut down low. Cut. Nice long one. Just about there is good to me. I'm going to go ahead and cut that right about there. Okay, and this will become our pie piece. I'm going to press that right about in the middle. Get that to bend. If it's a little bit uneven, you can always go and trim it if you want to. It's not a huge deal, but you can if you want. And that will be the base of our pie. Then we're going to cut a piece that is a little bit taller. So I'm going to use this side over here. And I'm going to go a little bit higher than the height of this D-wedge. So hopefully you can kind of see that a little bit. Scoot down a little bit. So here's my wedge. I'm going to go higher than that, so probably like up here, a little bit higher. This will be the crust. It's going to be not super thick, not super thin. For the back of my wedge, I'll stop there and then go over. So it's higher than the height of my wedge. Just like that. So it'll go like this, and then we're going to roll this over. So start with our tape. I'm going to put the colored part on the inside because the toilet paper will stick better to the cardboard instead of the painted cardboard. Painted cardboard is kind of sealed. Alright, so I'm going to tape this on here, cardboard side out. Just going to press a piece of tape on there like this. Now that that's secured to that piece, I can now tape on the next one a lot easier. So I can kind of just line it up and then press it down. If you try to hold them both and then try to press the tape, it gets a little complicated. It's a little bit harder. It's a little bit easier if you put the tape on one side, press it down, and then bring over that crust piece and put it on there like that. All right, so now that I've done that, I'm going to press with my thumb here. I'm going to press inward, kind of crunch that up, and let that roll down. Just work with it, kind of rub it, press it. And as you're doing that, it'll start to want to roll back. And I'm rolling it backwards away from the rest of the slice. And I'm going to tape it down. I'm going to tape it down with a piece like this. And then a piece here taped on the side. That was my door. It locks really loudly. I'm sorry if that was kind of weird. All right, so now I've got my crust and I've got my big old wedge. If you feel like it's too large, or mine is a pretty thick piece of pie, you could always cut it down smaller instead if you'd rather. So I'm pretty good with this kind of like gigantic piece of pie. I mean, I wouldn't eat pie that large, so that's okay with me. I am going to add some strips of tape across the top, just like this. You can do it across the bottom too if you want to, but it's not super important. this little bitty. Now I need to make sure that everything is pressed down well. Try to press down any edges that you see. The back here is a little bit uneven, so I'm actually going to tape it down a little bit more like this. Seal this up a little bit more. Make sure that that's pressed down. I think I'm going to do one more piece across the back there. It's a little bit warped funny. There we go. Pretty good. Okay, so now we've got our pie piece there. Press down as many edges as I could. If there's a little bit of bump, that's okay. Now we're just going to take toilet paper. We're going to kind of dip it into the water, squeeze it out, and then we're going to be pressing it onto our pie. Do a little bit of a time. If you do too much at one time, it's going to be overwhelming. It'll just all stick together. So just a little, like a few squares at a time. Press it down onto here. You can kind of smooth it out a little bit by just kind of folding it and then pressing it down. If you want to do the bottom on this, you can. I'm not going to worry about it. So I've left that part. I'm just going to kind of lay it on top. Let it press down. You can see I've got aluminum foil underneath my work. That's just to make sure it doesn't get on the table. It's going to be wet. I have a wooden table, so if it got wet all over my wooden table, it wouldn't be good. This will add a texture on it. I just did like a couple of sheets, and I can kind of flatten it as I work. You can even do one sheet of toilet paper at a time for even more control, kind of squeezing it out over the water bowl. I'm just gonna press it down, just kind of rub it. Press and rub, press and rub. And you come back and do some sheets on this side. Just gonna take one at a time. Press it down, kind of wrap it around inside the bottom. Like I said, you can do the bottom if you want. I'm just gonna leave it open. That's okay with me. I intend to put this down on the table for display, so the bottom will not be seen. So I'm not too concerned about that bottom. But if you are, you can cover it up with tape and then just add some toilet paper on there after the rest of this dries. If you try to flip it over, it may mess some things up. We're just trying to cover any of those holes. Just pressing down the side here. I really like the texture on the top. If you want more texture, if you're like, man, this is gonna be berry pie and I want there to be lots of texture, you can just lay this on there and press it down. Just make sure it all gets wet. And you can get a really nice texture. However, this is like a pumpkin pie, you may have more of a smooth texture. So maybe you just want to do one sheet at a time instead of a lot of sheets. Trying to make sure the back is pretty smooth because that is supposed to be a crust. And crust is usually pretty smooth. Not perfectly smooth, especially up here. Might have more texture at the top of this. I'm going back and making sure everything is covered with toilet paper. You can see a spot on the back that I still need to cover. There we go, everything is covered in toilet paper. Try to press out any air bubbles that you see. Clean up those edges. Check it all the way around. Make sure it's completely covered in toilet paper. I want a little bit more texture on this side, so I'm going to do another sheet and just wrinkle it up on there, add some more texture. I love berry pies. Berry pies are so good to me. I made a strawberry pie last summer with strawberries that we grew at my house, and they were so good. Best pies are homemade pies, in my opinion. A little bit more. I'm just very carefully unfolding it. Depending on the brand of toilet paper that you have, it may be easier or harder to unfold it. That was too much, so I'm ripping that in half. I'm going to apply the rest of that over here because I can see a hole. All right. And once you have that covered, you're going to let that sit and dry. Make sure it's all pressed down. Make sure that it's rotating, that nothing came up. All right, we're going to let that sit. And we will come back to it tomorrow. I'm going to let it sit at least a whole day. You could always go a couple days if you wanted to, but at least a whole day to sit. All right, see you next time. Welcome back. I have come back into the studio, so this is a little different, but we're going to go ahead and get ready to paint. So one thing I want to make is the color of the crust. So to make brown, you're going to take all of your primary colors. I'm using the back of my brush. You could use a popsicle stick for palette knife, but try again not to mix with your paintbrush. It can ruin the bristles. Wipe off your palette knife or the back of your brush every time that you switch colors. You don't want to contaminate the colors that are already there. So lots of yellow, a little bit of red. You can mix those as you go if you'd like. That's a lot of red, so I may end up needing more yellow to balance that out. Because I'm seeing a lot of red, it doesn't look like orange. And then my blue. So I'm taking all three of my primary colors, taking some of those with the back of my brush, and mixing it together. Since there wasn't as much yellow and there's more red and blue in this, it's probably going to turn out kind of purple. But a little bit of yellow has neutralized it fairly well, so it looks actually kind of like a gray to me. But it's kind of purpley. I'm going to continue mixing until it's completely mixed together. Then we'll test it on our napkin. That looks like gray or black. Pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and add some more yellow though, because what I'm looking for is brown. So if you're ending up with black, you should probably add a little bit more yellow and maybe a little bit more red. We'll see if we'll need the red. Some more yellow. Looking a little bit more greeny, which means if we're seeing green, the opposite color is red. So we are going to mix some red in it. Getting closer to a brown, it's looking good. To make any color, you really only need the primary colors. You really only need red, yellow, and blue. And then you should be able to mix to get everything else, all your secondaries, your orange, your violet, even brown like we're getting. That's a fairly good brown. It's a little bit red still in my opinion, so I still want to add more yellow. Some of this yellow I think is dried in the bottom. I may need to go grab some more, which is fine. Try not to overflow your palette. So if you have a palette like this, try not to make it overflow. If you're getting too much of paint in one spot, you may want to put it on an extra plate or something to save it, but try not to let it overflow on the palette itself. I'm going to take some white to lighten this and mix it in. So we can see this brown that is appearing. It's a little bit more visible now that we've added some white. But it doesn't quite look like crust. It definitely needs more yellow. So that means that I am gonna go grab some more yellow because some of this had dried in the bottom. Here's my yellow. Always check to make sure that it says acrylic paint, acrylic polymer. So this is definitely acrylic paint. Add some more yellow in there. I'm gonna take this yellow and I'm going to mix quite a bit of it in. We need quite a bit because there's a lot of paint already in there. So I'm trying not to let my brush touch this brown until I'm ready to mix. So every time that it touches it, I have to wipe it off with the napkin again. Getting closer, still kind of more like a tree brown rather than a golden crust brown. So I'm gonna grab some more yellow, kind of just try to shake it off into there so that my back of my brush doesn't touch the brown, so I can go back and forth and get more as needed. All right, that was a lot of yellow. Let's mix that in. Getting closer. Still more yellow. I'm gonna need a new napkin soon. I'm almost completely out of napkin. So yellow is a very weak color, which is why we need so much of it. It's okay to need more yellow. You can see that my palette here is getting kind of close to being too full. I wouldn't add any more paint to this little area. So this is pretty close. It's still not what I want. I'm going to take some of this and put it over here. So if you have a well that's getting too full, you can push it over into a different well. These little dips are the wells. Clean off my brush again. It still needs to be more golden, so I'm going to add more yellow. And then a little bit of red. Because it's kind of turning too yellowy. It's looking kind of sickly. So if we add a little bit of red, that's too much. Tiny bit of red. It should help to make it look more orangey like crust, instead of looking kind of neon-y and kind of sickly. Looking for a happier brown. Ooh, that got a little too red. So what we can do is bring some of it over here and then bring some of this over here. Because I think if I mix these two, I'm gonna get a pretty nice color. Pretty good. Keep mixing that. It's a pretty dark color, so I can add more of my yellow, I can add more of my white. New napkin. More yellow. I could add the yellow directly in there, but I want to have a lot of control over how much yellow I'm adding, so it's not like back and forth in between too much yellow. So I'm going to add quite a bit of yellow. This way you can really see how much you're adding and you don't over add. If you try to rush it and just pour it in there, sometimes it doesn't work out. Add a little bit more white. Mix this together. I think a little bit of yellow and of white. Mix that in there. And I think that I'll be happy with that crust color. More yellow, more white. There we go. I think that's a great color. Mix the edges a little bit more. Get it all mixed in there really well. All right, I'm happy with that crust color. And then you also need to decide what kind of pie you are creating. I do want this to be a berry pie. So if you're like me and you have a small palette, You can mix on the middle areas here. So I'm thinking of a berry pie. I want it to be mixed berries, so it'll have like kind of a purple looking, so I'm adding blue and red together to make a purple looking area. That'll be my filling. I'll try to save as much of that color as I can, so wipe that off carefully. Wonderful. Now you want a larger brush. You don't want a really tiny one for this. We're going to start with larger. Remember, the crust is going to go all along the back and along the bottom, and also it could be on the top depending on what kind of pie you have. You can also sculpt things on the top of this. So if you want a whipped cream, you could sculpt that in your toilet paper. I did have to leave this for about 2 days before I'm ready to paint. All right, so now I'm ready. I'm going to start taking my colors and adding it on there. If your color is not smoothing like you want it to, grab a little bit of water, and you can add the water on top to help the acrylic paint to smooth onto it. It may make the toilet paper a little wet again, but it will make your paint go farther. And it will also help it to go into the cracks in between different areas. So we're just gonna paint it on there. Now that I've made sure it's all filled in, I added lots of water to help that kind of seep into those little cracks and get that covered. I am ready to move on to my crust. I'm going to wash off my brush, dab it on my paper towel, pick up my crust color, and just start painting my crust. All right, once you have it painted, just go back around and make sure you got all those holes filled. If there's any white showing, you can go back over that. Making sure that your crust is completely painted all the way around. All right, so I've got the basics painted. I can go back with a darker brown, so if I added a little bit more blue to this, it can be a little bit darker. Mix that just a little bit, and you can go and add maybe some darker detailing on there. You know how crust gets a little bit darker in some places. So you can add some of that texture there if you want to. You can paint your whipped cream if you have that on here. You could add other details. You could add the braiding detail if you wanted. Whatever it is that you're wanting to add on here, you can add it. So I kind of added some depth to it. I can add some here on the back as well. So just whatever other little details that you want to add, you could even go in here and add more texture, some darker and lighter areas, even showing the berries. But now we have our piece painted. We gotta let it dry, and then you're gonna take some photos of this and send me those photos. So make sure you let it dry for about a day. Let it just kind of sit there and wait, and then come back and take photos after it's dried, because right now if you try to touch it, some of those little pieces of toilet paper are going to try to stick to your hand. So just be careful with that. All right, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this pie making. See, I need to go back and paint that now because I'm touching it. And we'll see you guys later. Have a great day.